Church, I first want to say thank you to this congregation. That's how I would like to start this morning. The thank you for what you have done for my family and I over the years. You have helped us raise our daughter. It is not normal that a minister stays for as long as I have. The typical length of time is anywhere from 2 to 6 years. 4 is normal. The joke is the preacher runs out of sermons and he has to go to the next destination and reteach those sermons for 4 years and go to the next church. Really, Steve, with the frog? I love you guys. That's just why I love my family, because I got great friends here with me too. But, I have been here almost 19 years, and you have helped us raise our daughter. And I know, like Delma and Jan, when they were taking care of our kids, Jonathan, JC, and Jolie, I have pictures of both of them at Delma and Jan's, and they helped. You have taught our children in Bible class. You have taken us into your homes, and we've enjoyed our lives with you. You've pulled our kids aside and loved on them, and I can't thank you enough. We get to this point, and it's reflecting. You look back, and you look at your child, and they're about to leave. They're going to leave the home and begin their life a little bit, and I can't look back without seeing you there. And I want to say thank you to this congregation. I believe I could, if you will let me, Jonathan, speak on behalf of both of our families. And the way that you guys have taken in Jason and loved on him as a family as well, we're truly blessed. And we're truly blessed to have our graduates. We get to celebrate them today. If you have your Bibles, I'd like you to open to Judges, the 2nd chapter. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in Judges with you. I'm going to spend a very short period of time, one lesson, I believe. That's all I want to do. And I want to look at this, but really bring in a lesson for our teenagers today, for our graduates about to leave. And I thought to myself, what is it that I want to tell them? What do I want to say to them before they leave and they go on with their life? But I think it's a very applicable lesson, not just for our graduates, but for everyone who's sitting here today. And actually, the way that our lessons have gone, it fits in perfectly. We're talking about faithfulness. We're talking about putting our faith into action the last several weeks. And now we get to this point of really understanding who God is through the Old Testament. And we come to the book of Judges, and will you go to the next slide for me, please? And this is really what the book of Judges is all about. It's just a cycle. And on your handout, I know the cycle's right there in the middle. If you want to start filling that in, please feel free and do so. And what we start with is a relationship with God in the very beginning. That's what you find throughout the book of Judges. The people have a relationship with God, but then they choose to do what they want to do. They choose to go in a different direction away from God, and what they do is they leave God. They leave that relationship alone, and they say, God, we don't need you. And then they find themselves in bondage, whether it's the Midianites under Gideon, or the Canaanites, or the Amalekites, or the Amorites. Pick an ite. They're always under bondage. God told them when they came into the promised land, we're going to look at that in just a moment in Judges, the 2nd chapter, that they were supposed to leave everyone in that land, push them out, and the land was supposed to give to them, but they don't do that. They don't listen to God, and now they're under bondage. While they're under bondage, they look back to God and say, deliver us. They're asking for repentance. They want to come back into that relationship with God. And so God sends them a deliverer. In this book, it is a judge. A judge rises up. The Spirit of the Lord usually comes upon them, and they rise up. They lead the people of God. And during the lifetime of that judge, the people are faithful. But again, when you read through the book of Judges, and you probably have done that in your lifetime, what happens is that judge goes away, and the people begin their vicious cycle again. And what I have realized, this cycle is the very same cycle that we go into and go through as well. I want to read Judges from the 2nd chapter. I want to read the first few verses together, the first 5 verses. It says, Now the angel of the Lord went from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said to them, I brought you out of the land of Egypt. I brought you into the land I swore to give to your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. So this angel shows up of the Lord, tells the people, and he's talking to them. He said, listen, I've done everything I told you to do, that I was going to do. I brought you out of Egypt. I brought you into the land that I promised you. And you shall make no other covenant. This is verse 2. And I told you, don't make a covenant with any of the inhabitants of the land. You shall break. If you do, you shall break down their altars. but you have not obeyed my voice. And so this is where we're at. We're at that cycle. They had a relationship with God, but they're making their own decisions. God said, go into the land, destroy everyone, take down their altars. You don't take down those altars, those gods are going to come back and get you. You're going to believe in those gods as well. They didn't do that. They didn't destroy the inhabitants, and they said, you didn't listen to my voice. You did not obey my voice. This is what you have done. So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted their voices and wept. And they called that place, Bochim. And what that means is a place of weeping. And they sacrificed to the Lord. So God says, hey, I was your Lord. I was your God. I brought you, and you saw all these amazing things. God came into the land. Joshua was leading you. Caleb was leading you. And now you've chosen to walk away. You've left me. And if you break this covenant with me, it's not my fault that is broken. You've made that choice. And now you need to understand, the people that you've left, they're going to be a thorn in your side. The gods that you have, that you've left out there on the high places, those are things that are going to hurt you as well. I want to run down here now to verse 11. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served the Baals. And they abandoned their Lord and the God, their fathers, and who brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they went after other gods. And from among the gods of the peoples that were around them, and they bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. I want to go a little farther down to 15. And they abandoned their Lord and served the Baals and the Asheroth. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them into the plunderers, and who plundered them, and sold them into the hand of their surrounding enemies, and they were no longer to withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, and the Lord, as the Lord had warned, and the Lord has sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. What I want you to see here is that there was a plan, but the people left that plan. They left God's plan. They did what they wanted to do. I want to look at two other verses, verse 16 and verse 17. And I'll tell you what, when I've been studying and getting ready for this passage of script, this whole lesson, and this passage really got me. Look at verse 16 and 17 with me. So up to this point, they abandoned God. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Then the Lord raised up judges, thank goodness, who saved them out of the hand of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they whored after other gods and bowed down to them. Did you hear that? Does that word make you uncomfortable? Because it makes me uncomfortable. Do you understand what God just called us? See, I didn't like that word, so I did what every good preacher does. We go to the NIV because they dumb it down really well in that version. Not even a smile. I like the NIV as well. But I went to the NIV. I said, what word do you use? I need to know what word you use because I don't like the word hoard. And it said, we prostituted ourselves. Well, I don't like that word. That makes me uncomfortable and tells me what I'm doing to my God in that relationship with God. So I went to the American Standard. Why all Americans should. Thank you for laughing at that one at least. It says harlot. Man, I don't want to be called a harlot either. A harlot is selling yourself for something. An evil. When I looked at this, I said to myself, what does this mean? And it's talking about I'm selling myself to idolatry. I'm looking to God and I'm saying to God, I don't want you. I want this. And I'm literally selling myself to evil. I don't like that terminology. I don't want to look at that. I wish I could take that out. But that hit me right here all week. I thought about this all week. And who I really am at times and where I need to be with my relationship with God. Because far too often, I'm like those Israelites. They soon turned aside from the way of which their fathers had walked, who obeyed the commandments of the Lord, for they did not do so. What I want to look at today, they committed idolatry. What they wanted was freedom. If you go to the next slide, I think Yeah, they wanted freedom. It's one of those things that you hear in our culture and our society today, and this is something I want to really talk to our kids and to all of us today, but so often we want freedom. So what the people of Israel said, we have the promised land, and God said, within this freedom that I'm giving to you, I'm going to give you this land. Within the land, you can have, there's milk and there's honey that's flowing. They were an agriculture society, for sure. We know that they were shepherds from the time of Egypt even. The land was beautiful. I'm going to give you fortified cities within that land. I'm going to give you everything this land can give you. The beauty, the wonders. Here's the freedom I'm giving to you. Take it. But there's only one thing you have to do to enjoy the freedom I'm giving to you, and that is stay within the boundaries of our covenant. And the people said, no, I want to do this. See what I just did? They were living in the freedoms, but then they took it and go, I don't want you, God. I don't want you. I want this. I'm going to do what I want to do. See, this is freedom, right? That's what we're taught. Freedom. I want. That's not freedom at all. That's not freedom at all. Freedom is always within boundaries. I'm going to say that again. Freedom is only found within boundaries. And what happens here, if they say, this is what I want to do, we stay right here and they realize, hey, this is not what I want. Now I'm under bondage of what I wanted, what was always sin. They sold themselves to idolatry, to other gods, to other peoples, to other marriages, and whatever else came along. And they go, oh, we don't want this. I want to be back into the freedom of a relationship with God. Go to the next slide for me. If you want to put on your paper, it's not up there. On the side, on the left-hand side, which says, we choose to leave God and we're in bondage, I would put and write down there, I want my freedom. I want my freedom. That's what I want. I went off to Harding, and I got to the border, and when I got to the border, I handed a paper to the Border Patrol on the American side. It was an I-90 form. I don't even know if that exists anymore, to be honest. I handed him my form, and he would look at it, and he would look at what school I'm going to. The I-90 says I have permission to go to school at Harding University. The international advisor had to sign it, blah, blah, blah. You don't care. But he would look at that, and he would laugh at me, and he would go, Arkansas? There's no schools in Arkansas, son. Why are you going to Arkansas? And I was like, yeah, there's a school down there. He goes, man, they don't wear shoes down there. They eat all bugs, and why are you going to school? Why? Stay in Michigan. And so he and I would banter a little bit. I learned the hard way, don't banter too much with the Border Patrol. And I said, he handed that back to me. He goes, young man, you have a safe trip. And I said, okay, well, if you don't want me to go to Arkansas, I'll go anywhere else. He goes, no. That paper says you go to Arkansas. Do you see how that switched right there? Hey, I have the freedom to go to school in the United States of America, and I was truly, truly blessed to come here. I could have went to school anywhere I wanted, but I was going to go to Searcy, Arkansas, to Harding University, and that road that I was leaving from Michigan went to Searcy, Arkansas. I had the freedom, but there were boundaries, and that paper said you go to Arkansas. I wasn't allowed to go to Arizona, go to school, California, or anywhere else. I went to Arkansas. I got to Harding University, and I said, I got freedom from my parents. I'm going to live my life. Woohoo! I'm going to eat what I want to eat. For a couple days, a couple weeks, I stayed in the cafeteria. Do you know they serve the same food every day? So we stopped eating there, and I said, I'm not eating this no more. I want pizza, because my mama's not telling me I can't eat pizza, so I started eating pizza. Did you know pizza costs money? So a while later, all that money I made over the summer, I didn't have it anymore. So I called home to my father. And I said, Dad, I need some money. Why do you need money? I've been eating pizza. And he goes, bad choice. Click. Not lying. He hung up on me. And back then, you had to make a collect call. I called back. I thought it was a disconnected line. And then I heard the lady go, will you accept a collect call from Jonathan Page? I heard the word, no. Click. He said, hey, you can eat what you want, you can buy what you want, but there's boundaries. You got only so much money. Then I realized something else. I was at Harding University. I could go out on a Tuesday and do anything I wanted. It was a school night, and I could go out with my friends. I could stay out, do whatever I want. If I wanted to go to Little Rock, I went to Little Rock. If I wanted to go do this, I went to this. And it was a school night, and I was excited until I realized I had to be home at a curfew. That's right, I had a curfew at Harding. I had to be in my dorm at 11 o'clock, in my dorm room, and check in with my RA before 11 o'clock. On the weekends, 12 o'clock. And if I signed out, 1 o'clock. You see, understand? I could do what I wanted. I had freedom to do whatever I wanted with my friends, but I was still within boundaries. And there was even rules that Harding University set up, said you can't do this, this, and this, or you don't go to school here. I still had boundaries. I don't want to go to class. Well, Harding said 3 absences, unexcused absences, you lose a letter grade. Oh, so I had the freedom to take whatever classes I want, do whatever, and make my schedule, but there were boundaries still. See, freedom has boundaries. Everything has boundaries, but within that freedom, God says you are free to do anything you want within this relationship, but there are boundaries to our covenant agreement, and you got to do your part. I want to use an example to you is going to Luke, the 15th chapter. I'm not going to go through all of it. It's the prodigal son, and we know the story. The son goes, he has freedom within God, with his father. Sorry, it is God in the parable, but he has freedom with his father. And he says, no, I want my freedom. So give me my stuff. This is what I want because I want to live. I want to do these things. I want to leave. And so the father says, go, because that's what he does. So when you're in the father's freedom, we're like this. When we're like, we don't want that. I don't want you, Dad. I want mine. I want to get mine. And he leaves. What happens? He goes under bondage. He goes through all of his money. He does whatever he wants to do. He finds himself literally with friendless because the only friends were there because of the money and what they got out of him. He literally finds himself feeding pigs. And for the Jewish person, that is the worst of worst jobs that you can do. Because pigs were unclean and you're feeding them slop. And then he was so down into bondage of the choices that he has made, he wanted to eat the slop the pigs were having. And he realized something to himself. He goes, I don't want to be in this. I want to be back into my father's freedom. And he even thought about this. The servants of my father have freedom. Now think about that for a second. He thought about a servant has no freedom. But within the father's love, that servant is free. You got to think about that for a while. I'm going to let you go ahead and muzzle on that for the week. He thought about the person who has no freedom has more freedom within the father. He gets up and he goes back to his father. And his idea is, I can't be a son anymore. I took that away. So I'll just go back and try to be a servant. Go to the 15th chapter, I believe it's verse 20. He's walking along the road and the father sees him and he arose and he came to his father. Went to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. He felt compassion, and he ran, and he embraced him. Do you see this? When you embrace someone, you got to what? Open up your arms and say, there's freedom back here. I embrace you. He takes that. He embraces him. He kisses him on the cheek. That was showing him respect and love, part of the family once again. But he embraces him. He goes, you can always come back into this freedom. The son even says, I can't be your son. I have to be a servant. He goes, you're not a servant. You're my son. Kill the fatted calf. We're having a party. Put a robe, put a ring, put sandals on him. He is found. Once he was lost, but he is found. He understood the freedom that he had within God. It was so important. What our culture and what our society tells us is, if it makes you feel good, that's freedom. If you want it, that's freedom, and take it. If everyone acted like that, if that's freedom, if that's your definition of freedom, of whatever you want to do, however you want to feel, whatever you want to say, do whatever you want to act like, if that's freedom, that's not freedom, that is anarchy. And that cannot work. Freedom has boundaries, and we need to live within those boundaries of God. He comes back into the relationship with God, becomes his son again, And you find the same thing within the book of Judges over and over again, learning and realizing, making their choice, wanting my freedom, realizing there is no freedom. I need to come back to God to find that relationship again, and he calls them the children of God once more. This is the last lesson I really want to look at with you and really tell our kids today. I'm going to start in Galatians. I want you to see what the New Testament says about freedom. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 13. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 13 says, if you were called to freedom, brothers, not only do you use freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but but through love serve one another. I don't think I have verse 14. I do. Very good. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You know what I absolutely love? He goes, hey, you don't use your freedom to do the things you want to do for you. What you find every time when I've been looking through the scripture and looking at freedom, you find it's not even about you within the freedom of this relationship with God, but it's about others. He says we can sum it up in one word. Love one another. Look at another example of this in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 16. He says this, live as people who are free, not using your freedom to cover up for evil. Do you remember what he says in Romans the 6th chapter? Do we continue to sin that grace may abound? What are you doing? We don't use our freedom in God to cover up sin. We don't use it to cover up our idolatry. We don't use it for that. How do I use my freedom in God? And this is what he says to me. But living as servants of God. Verse 17 says, honor everyone. Love your brotherhood. Fear God. And then he even says, honor the emperor. Wow. So I'm supposed to not even use the freedom I have in God for me. It's not even for me. It's actually using it for you and serving you and loving you. You see how society looks at freedom and how a Christian should look at freedom? It's two totally different things. How do you love one another? Well, within the freedom of God. But Jesus tells us in John the 10th chapter in verse 10, he goes, hey, the thief comes to steal. That's what the world is taking from us. They're taking what it means to be free from us. He goes, I came here to give you life, not just a little bit of life, but I want you to live an abundant life. And that is my prayer and what I want to say to our young people today. I want you to live not just life, but I want you to live it abundantly. And this is what I have learned. When I stay within the confines of what God wants me to be as a man of God or as a woman of God, if I understand his commandments and I live by them, I find all of this freedom. The people walked away from the land flowing of milk and honey. And God says there's just tremendous blessing in here. It's flowing with milk and honey. Enjoy it, embrace it, partake of it. Because this is what I want to give to you when we are in a covenant, a good relationship with one another. It's understanding of the future, a hope. We talked about in our Bible class this morning, going through the storms of life. How do you get through the storms? How do you get through the most difficult times in your life? It's with that relationship with God. And then through that relationship with God, there's others who are loving on me, getting me through the storms of life. It's all found there. What I would want to tell you today is this, and I want to finish with this. The story of Judges is redemption. It is redemption. I can tell you right now that I find myself on the right side of that fairly often of that chart, making my own decisions, thinking for myself, doing what I want to do because I feel like that's what I should do, and I find myself out of relationship with God. But here's the beautiful thing about this. We can always come back to God. God is always there saying, I'm here. Come back into the freedom that you can have through forgiveness and through a life with me. That is the lesson that we have. You are going to make mistakes. To my 3 graduates, you are going to make mistakes. Learn from your failures, get back up, and regain yourself within the freedom of God and that love relationship with God, and you'll be okay. But then also rely on your church family, no matter what. It's incredible what God has given us. Stop listening to the world and understand the true freedoms we have in Jesus Christ. Don't let them take something from you that has been a free gift from God. This morning, if we can help you, encourage you in any way.